Joining me, the former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and former Labor Minister Stephen Conroy. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Stephen, does this RBA review hit the mark to your mind?
Look, I think it does if you look at the need to bring in expertise that can actually question the assumptions that are behind the modelling, which is what I think the most fundamental failure has been. And the report, in its own very gentle economic speak way, makes the point there's been too much focus and reliance on wages driving up prices. That's code for you've got this completely wrong. Gently put, but completely wrong. So I think this is an important step. I think it's important to bring the expertise, the separating of the boards. I think it's important to allow the Treasurer to take a deep breath before he makes his final decision about whether or not to sack the Reserve Bank Governor, which I believe he should do based on the lack of in any way serious mea culpa, not for the words that he used, but the flaws in the modelling.
Michael Kroger, what's your reaction to what you've seen today? It is going to see a significant shift at the central bank.
It will. I'm not sure there's been anyone today that's disagreed with this. It seems like everyone's unanimously in favour of a group of people being set up as a committee who are actually experts in monetary policy, and that's what they do all day. So I think that's a very good idea, keeping the inflation band at 2 to 3%, tick to that, and letting the Reserve Bank concentrate on its other functions. I think an all-round good idea. I don't think the Liberal Party are going to object. I heard Angus Taylor. He seems to be separate to going through the details, fully in agreement, and I think it's a very good idea. As for Philip Lowe, well, he's not going to get reappointed. And, the one thing the government could do, or the Reserve Bank could be asked to do, is to explain why, when rates were 0.1, they said they were going to remain on hold till 2024 when inflation got out of control. I then followed the inflation trail by rapidly increasing rates. How did they make that shocking blunder? Because that's caused untold damage in this country.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough budget, this one, for Jim Chalmers to try and get the balance right, Stephen Conroy. They obviously want to try and help people, but they're limited to what they can do given this inflationary environment at the moment.
No, absolutely. And you've seen, Jim indicate that they won't be putting up Job Seeker. I mean, this is, for those who are disappointed by this, you need a long-term Labor government if you want to deal with some of these, absolutely big issues like the level of poverty in this country. Don't expect Labor to be able to fix everything in its first budget. Be realistic. Yes, we would all like to see that, but there is also a range of other people who are hurting in a range of other areas. Energy prices is the very obvious one. So if for those who are saying, oh my God, Labor hasn't fixed everything in its first budget, and this is the first real budget, the last one was more of a sort of, not even a mini budget, it was an economic statement, but this is the first Labor budget since we were elected. So be realistic, be pragmatic. We cannot fix everything the first time round. But if you want those issues addressed, you want to see a long-term Labor government, 3, 6, 9 years.
There will be, the coffers will be full though, because commodity prices have remained high, Michael. I know you've been very critical of Jim Chalmers, as Stephen and I know. You've opened the shoulders on him quite a few times, but this budget's obviously an important test for the Treasurer.
Well, it is. I mean, my criticism of Jim has been that he's been a commentator, and in contrast to some of the ministers who performed very well, Richard Marles, the Trade Minister has done very well, Don Farrell. I think he's been one of the weaker performers. He's now finding how hard it is to resist pressures on a Labor Treasurer. The demands of the left constituency are always greater than the capacity to deliver. So, of course, there are going to be disappointed people with Chalmers' budget, but he's got to resist pressures on him, which means that the budget continues to be radically in debt and out of control. The one bad thing that's come out of the pandemic is that people think the governments can fix everything. And to Stephen's point, let's hope people don't think that Labor government or any government can fix anything in one or any more budgets, because the governments can't do that. 80% of this country are people employed in the private sector. They're the ones generating the jobs, the wealth, and the taxes. And as for the resources boom, well, this is an industry basically that the left in Australia want to close down. So one of the reasons the Australian economy is so incredibly strong is because of the resources boom and our mineral exports. Yet the minerals industry get nothing but criticism from the Greens and the nutty left all day long. So we're in this very strange environment at the minute where those propping up the economy get hit over the head every day by the mainstream press and by the left, Kieran.
It's going to prop up the budget, that's for sure. This year, those resources prices are still very, very high. Stephen, on the Voice, Jacinta Price appointed by Peter Dutton. This is really putting all his chips in, isn't it, with this No campaign? A lot at stake here, Stephen Conroy, for both leaders, particularly for the opposition leader.
Look, I think Dutton's call was a big call. He really is saying, I'm against the Voice, and if you look at the under 40 cohort, you look at the strongest vote for the Voice, it's under 40. You look at already the weakest Liberal demographic, it's the under 40. So he is playing to his weakness here. So I think it's a big call. I think Jacinta will be articulate. She'll be a strong advocate for the no case, but you've already seen the Aboriginal Land Council come out today, Central Land Council, saying stop saying you're our people. You don't represent us, you don't represent our voices, and when you say all these Indigenous Australians don't understand what they're talking about or what's being talked about in the Voice, you're not right. So I think this is going to be a big debate for the next few months.
And Michael, I think your point is that the opposition leader needs to really start defining himself by his own agenda and about what he stands for. To me, his budget reply is going to be so important to try and get a bit of momentum in that regard. He's got to come up with something, Michael.
Well, that's absolutely right. You can't run a campaign for 6 months on one issue in opposition, because win or lose, you get to October, November, you've got nothing else on your policy agenda. You've said nothing. And to think you can grab a few policies from the supermarket shelf, spit them out over a period of a few months, and then go to an election late next year, which I might do, and say, here are our policies, against no background, no seeding the ground, no relevance to brand, Liberal equities, etc., is a recipe for electoral defeat. So, if I were Peter and the senior team members, you've got to start developing and announcing some serious alternative policies ASAP. You cannot have a debate on one issue for 6 months, particularly when Labor are running on 15 or 20 issues. They'll get credit for those, and we'll get credit or discredit for one. So, yeah, you're right. The budget reply is a very important piece of rhetoric where Peter Dutton needs to set down what our alternative policies are in a number of areas, and he could start with tax, because that's where the Australian economy is leaking incredibly badly, and he'd be very wise to follow that up.
Yeah, he needs to define himself with something along those lines, doesn't he? Michael, Stephen, great to see you both.
Correct.